So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jog Hundle. I'm one of the employment partners at Mills and Reeve Solicitors. So we're really proud to be sponsoring the HPMA's Leading in Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Award. The importance of putting equality, diversity and inclusion at the heart of what we all do is gathering more and more traction, albeit there is still much more work for us all to do. So you've heard this morning from an array of high-profile specialists on the essential steps for delivering greater inclusion and diversity. And building on this morning, I'm delighted to present to you this year's 3 shortlisted entries for the Leading in Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Award. So the finalists stood out to the judging panel because they evidence that they have the weight and might of their organisations behind them. So this is what all 3 finalists demonstrated. But they were also able to evidence that positive and sustained change is taking place within their trusts and further afield to further equality, diversity and inclusion. So this is an opportunity for each of these finalists to share their success with us, as well as key learning for us to take away. So do submit your questions via the chat function and we'll keep an eye on them, because there'll be time for questions at the end of each of the presentations from each of the finalists. And part of my role as chair is to keep an eye on the clock, but I'm not very good at that, so I might need some help. Before I do introduce the finalists, I also want to make it clear, speaking as a lawyer, that for the avoidance of doubt, the order in which the finalists are presenting is not an indication of their ranking, and that all will be revealed at the HPMA Excellence in People Awards, which are taking place virtually on the 7th of October. So if you're not already booked on, now's your opportunity. So the first of our finalists to present is the University Hospitals of Morecambe NHS Foundation Trust with the Towards Inclusion programme. And the key drivers here of this programme are Karmini Mcann, Head of Culture, Transformation, People and OD, and Hannah Chandisingh, who is able to join us today, who is the Race Equality Transformation Lead. And we'll hear from them via a video how their programme has put listening to the lived experiences of colleagues, patients and community groups at their heart. So this has led to embracing a data-driven approach, which has driven conversations through a deeper understanding, and the consequence has been development of improvement plans in partnership with different groups. So Karmini and Hannah, with the support of their wider team, are creating transformational change on the back of driving greater understanding and concrete actions based on sharing and understanding those all-important lived experiences. So I think I'm handing over to Lauren, who's now going to present the pre-recorded presentation. I understand that will last for about 15 minutes, and then Hannah's available to answer our questions. So over to you, Lauren.
Hello, my name's Karmini Mcann and I'm the Head of Culture Transformation at University Hospitals in Morecambe.
And hi, my name's Hannah Chandisingh and I'm Race Equality Transformation Lead. So Karmini, let's get started. So would you like to share a little bit, just to start with, about our approach to inclusion?
Yeah, so our approach to inclusion centres on the passion, commitment and action from colleagues across our whole organisation. So our 2016 to 21 inclusion strategy was developed through extensive listening and responding to feedback about people's experiences of us and what matters to different groups. The focus of our approach has been about developing leadership at all levels and learning from Michael West, who spoke at one of our leadership conferences a number of years ago. We've listened, so like really listened, not just superficially, to our colleagues' communities to really understand their experiences of our organisation. We've invested time in learning from others and best practice, and involvement in the NHS Employers Equality Partners programme has really helped us. We believe that we show compassion and understanding. We talk about difference, being open and transparent about the data relating to the experiences of different groups. And when we seek out and involve staff who've had really poor experiences to work together to drive improvements. And we believe that we're now acting with intelligence to make improvements. So our well-established inclusion networks led by staff for staff, which each have executive sponsorship, really drive our action plans and improvements in both colleague and patient experience, as well as providing peer support. Developing inclusive behaviours and leadership has been really important to us, as well as our behavioural standards framework and more traditional EDI online training in partnership with the Centre for Education, Training and Development at Lancaster University. We developed a new inclusive behaviours programme that we launched in 2018, paused after 1,800 people had taken part in it due to COVID response because of the delivery style of that particular programme, but we're now looking to restart. And we've been working with a national expert, Eden Charles, who launched and delivered workshops at the start of our inclusive leadership programme. And as well as these specialist programmes, as well as this, we've got specialist programmes. So our LGBT network have developed and deliver an LGBT plus awareness training package, Hannah for race equality. And we also take learning to our teams through professional away days, team time, and the use of personal stories has been really key to our approach. And since 2015, we've held an annual inclusion conference that we develop each year together with our inclusion networks. We've really embraced the national and NHS specific equality standards, and they've really helped shape and drive our improvements in colleague and patient experience. Meaningful application for us has been like absolute honesty about our current position, sharing it in a way to reach different people in different ways, using our current data to drive conversation and develop plans for action in partnership with different groups. And the NHS Workforce Race Equality Standard approach had such a positive impact on the way that we work with our minority ethnic colleagues, that we developed a local standard for sexual orientation, a local standard for disability, and were then invited to support the development of the National Disability Equality Workforce Standard. Locally, we've got a really kind of team UHMB approach, people across our organisation getting involved. There's not a week that goes past without kind of equalities being part of communications and engagement in our day-to-day business. And we've got people across the organisation being real champions for inclusive practice. I'd say that empowerment and fun are visible alongside how we work in partnership to tackle the really tricky issues that we face. Year on year, we've moved through the phases of our inclusion strategy, and moving into 2020 pre-pandemic, we were really seeing the outputs of our work come to fruition. However, we're still not getting it right for everyone every day. And we've really started to up the resource for targeted transformation and improvement. So 3 areas of that are the inclusive behaviours workshops that I talked about earlier, taking action, not just articulating support in relation to the disproportionate impact and the disproportionate impact of COVID, but also the disproportionate experience of minority ethnic communities in employment and healthcare. And then building on from our work to upskill managers and leaders and colleagues and the awareness raising around disability. We've worked with our disability staff network on a number of areas. So our disability leave policy, health passport, Change 100 disability internship programme, implementing disability employability programmes. So numerous examples working with the disability network, hearing of issues and then responding to those to make a difference for colleagues and patients. And then of course, COVID. And Hannah, do you want to talk a bit about our approach through COVID?
Absolutely. I mean, COVID, what a curveball, I think. And as an NHS hospital and community trust, our focus has been 100% on the pandemic, so caring for patients, our communities and our colleagues. And it could really have been a time that the inclusion agenda became smaller and less important. But actually, looking at the impact of COVID through this inclusion lens has meant that we can identify how different groups have been impacted and respond to different people's needs in different ways, which has been a real opportunity actually to engage with colleagues, to support them and really make a difference in their lives. So our approach really was, as soon as we saw this was happening, we very quickly increased how much we were communicating with and supporting our inclusion networks. So, for example, our Black, Asian, Minority Ethnic Staff Network set up a weekly steering group meeting, fortnightly network meetings, and had this ongoing virtual communication through Microsoft Teams, which meant that members had those opportunities to find out what was happening in a very fast-paced situation, and had, you know, really key, had those opportunities to ask questions of people who might know those answers. And on the other side of that, we undertook a full equality impact assessment on the impact of COVID on colleagues, which we developed in consultation, which was then signed off by boards, which includes a detailed action plan as well. So some of the actions that we took were making wellbeing calls, something as simple as wellbeing calls to colleagues who were shielding or who were off with COVID related sickness, and using that contact with shielders and other communications as well to raise awareness of our disability leave policy, of our health passport, which is something that helps us to identify adjustments and support that someone who has an underlying medical condition or a disability might need. And these health passports actually were used to help the deployment of colleagues to more appropriate alternative roles. So not everyone was able to continue safely in the role that they were in. And that was really key in getting people into the right places and supported in the right way. As the situation developed fairly early on in 2020, and the data began to emerge that ethnic minority communities and individuals were being impacted disproportionately, we did a formal review of this emerging data, which we took to board in April. And at that point, we were able to get approval to do demographic-based risk assessments, and that was ahead of the national guidance. So that was fantastic for us to move really, really quickly to protect all of our colleagues. We also appointed a BAME Network COVID Speak Up Ambassador. That was what we called it. And this was one of our doctors who we gave a day a week allocated to hear and support ethnic minority colleagues who had concerns. And he really has taken a key role, not only in sort of lifting up people's concerns and supporting people, but in supporting the rollout of risk assessments and being involved in actually a multidisciplinary team of people who were able to then quality review those risk assessments to make sure they actually were useful, helping people and not just a box ticking exercise. We also obviously worked a great deal with our other networks. So we made sure we were really ramping up our informal contact with network members, for example, in our LGBT network, recognising that those individuals might be at increased risk of isolation or more negative psychological impact through lockdown. So really just reaching out and taking that personal approach. And our network leads and our inclusion team put out wellbeing calls to network members across the patch, you know, to check in and just offer support. And on the other side, we had our occupational health and wellbeing team who were really proactive in reaching out to our networks to understand what people's needs were in terms of health and wellbeing, to really develop that bespoke support. And then we've got more developing networks. So, for example, our carers network, who are becoming a really key group to work with to make sure that we're supporting colleagues who have caring responsibilities. And it might be that they're helping us develop new policies, think about our approach differently, and just how we're communicating with people in that group. So that really strong inclusion base and the networks we've already had in place made an enormous difference to our approach to how we were able to support colleagues through COVID and continue to do so. However, on the other side of that coin, has really highlighted how far we still have to go. And I think race equality is unfortunately a perfect example of that. So in June 2020, following when we were starting to see these disproportionate impacts of COVID on ethnic minority people, following some of the global social movement with Black Lives Matter, which really highlighted existing and deepening inequalities globally and in our communities, our own communities, we launched a board-sponsored anti-racist programme, and I was appointed to lead that in a dedicated role. And it really was a recognition of this poorer experience that our ethnic minority colleagues are having in a number of areas, and the need to have a full organisational approach and not one solely carried out by EDI. So without having that full approach and that collective responsibility, we would not reach the point that we needed to get to. So the approach that we took with this was to launch 5 executive-led task and finish groups, which were established to take effective evidence-based action across a number of priority areas. So bullying and harassment, disciplinary processes, career progression, for example. And we wanted to understand the deeper picture. So not just to think about the experience of all BAME versus white, for example, but looking at different ethnic groups, different staff groups, different sites, and engaging with people in that way to understand patterns that we haven't been able to identify before and really improve the experiences of our communities. Another part of this has been about developing authentic allyship. So from development sessions at a board level to bespoke training and development sessions with small teams, so including our HR teams, for example, and creation of an anti-racist toolkit to really improve confidence and competence in talking about race. And the launch of an anti-racism influencers group chaired by our chief executive personally to spread this approach and that understanding through the organisation. And the approach at its core being centred on well-being. So making sure that our support services are truly fit for purpose in terms of skill, confidence, diversity of representatives, and that they're offering services which are needed, appropriate and culturally sensitive. And I'm going to stop there because I know we're running out of time, and I'm going to end by asking Karmini one last thing, which would be, what has been the key learning for you over the years?
I think a few things. So being ambitious, but realistic with what you can with what you're going to achieve in a particular time frame. Focus on those with a real passion for making change happen. Board ownership, board leadership, but also that direct connection between inclusion leads and the board. And empowering, supporting and enabling inclusion networks, colleagues across organisations to support each other, but also to make a difference and work with the organisation to make a difference on the issues that matter most to them.
Thanks, Karmini. So I'm going to say thank you to Karmini, who won't be joining us for our question and answer session. And I'm going to close by saying, this is the final month of our 5-year Towards Inclusion strategy. And from next month, we're going to be moving into our new Positive Difference strategy, which is really simple. We've got clear commitments for specific areas of improvement in colleague and patient experience. And I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I committed a sin. I was on mute then. Thank you so much, Karmini and Hannah, for that excellent presentation. I can see your passion running through every vein. So I had a question for you. I can see that there's a lot of networks and a growth of new networks, particularly the carer networks. And I think the technology and the teams has helped certainly those groups to grow stronger and engage better with each other, and also to bring issues to the forefront of the organisation as a whole. What I'm really interested in is knowing how you then bring occupational health services, which are now sometimes referred to as health and wellbeing services, how you bring them on board, because sometimes I see advisors that are a bit outmoded, a bit outdated, they certainly don't recognise the organisation all the time. So how do you bring them into the fold? How do you modernise them?
That's a fantastic question, and it's something that's absolutely a work in progress for us at the moment. So our approach has been to do a bit of a diagnostic, really. So we've had some feedback from different networks about how they're engaged with the different services that are available and what's worked well and what hasn't. And so we've gone in and we've done a diagnostic session with some of our therapists, our counsellors, to see actually where they are and how they feel. And I think some of the reflections from them have been, I don't feel like I understand everything. I don't feel that I'm in the right place, and I haven't necessarily had that development that I need. So what we're trying to do now is put together a sort of a bespoke package for those individuals who are in those roles, which is a little bit different from what we're able to provide when we're just training colleagues on the front line, for example, because they then need to take that into their practice in a different way. But we're trying to do that in a very nuanced way. So we're not reaching out and assuming nobody knows about this, because, you know, we're dealing with professionals who have a lot of expertise in a lot of areas. So I think between doing that, taking that quite nuanced approach, and actually then taking a more data-driven approach, looking at who's accessing our services, what kind of things are working for different people, where are we losing people, that's how we're trying to really make some changes. And I think actually the biggest challenge we've had is among the diversity of the staff we've got in those roles, actually, because it is a very white profession. There's not a lot we can do about that in the moment. And we're working on how we can give those people the confidence and the competence to really provide the right services.
That's really, really helpful. So thank you, Hannah. So that's our entry from the University Hospitals of Morecambe Bay. Thank you. So moving on, thank you, Hannah. Moving on to the second of our finalists to present, we have a team from North Staff's Combined Healthcare NHS Trust, with delivering on diversity, achieving a major shift in our culture of race inclusion. So representing the Trust today, Sajida Ahmed, Director of People, OD and Inclusion, Amina Begum, Lead for the Equality Network for Race Inclusion and Cultural Heritage, and Lesley Faux, Diversity and Inclusion Lead. So this is a team who are dedicated to delivering on diversity beyond their own trust to the wider ICS. So we'll hear from them on how they have created their culture of race inclusion. So their philosophy is to support all groups to flourish through active leadership and championing biodiversity of their senior teams. So Sajida, Amina and Lesley will describe how they're delivering tangible results despite the challenges of the pandemic, and then we'll have an opportunity to put questions to them at the end of their presentation. So over to the North Staff's Combined team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jog. Lesley, do you want to pull up the presentation?
Share those slides, yeah.
Oh,
There we are. Oh, gone too far.
that's fine. Jog's done a wonderful job of introducing us, Lesley. So I think we can move on to the next slide in the interest of time. I think that'd be great. Thank you. Right, okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity to talk about what we've been doing in terms of really enhancing and developing our culture of race inclusion within combined healthcare, which is what we like to call ourselves within the Trust. My role is twofold. As Jog says, I'm the Director of People, but I'm also the ICS executive lead around all things in relation to inclusion, health and well-being, leadership and organisational development. And that's important because that gives you an indication in terms of just how committed we are towards, you know, the inclusion agenda overall. So what I want to do today is just give you a little bit of an idea of the approach that we've taken in terms of getting some really positive results, which has been evidenced in terms of some of the big improvements we've seen in our workforce race equality standards measures for this year. This is around the approach that we've taken in terms of developing that wider inclusion around the activities and work that's been undertaken around our recruitment initiatives and the communication strategies and approaches that we've put in place in terms of really that scale and spread around inclusion, not just throughout our own organisation, but also throughout our system. So if you can move me on to the next slide, please, Lesley.
Okay.
So this is around the fact that, you know, we've all seen, you know, the world the past year around Black Lives Matters, etc. We've seen some very emotional stories around racism and systemic discrimination. And for us, one of the key priorities was around that education piece. You know, we found a lot of people who are very uncomfortable in terms of talking about racism as a wider conversation. And this was around really making sure that we had robust educational programs in place. So one of the key things we started off with was a concept called the Inclusion School. The Inclusion School is a program of learning, conversational stories, etc., which is based around the seasons. Now, the reason that we've done it around the seasons is because you cannot just do one program and that's the end of it. Race inclusion is something that we are going to do year on year across every season, because this is about really embedding in that cultural transformation around something that's really fundamentally important when you're trying to tackle workforce inequalities. So we've had an inclusion school approach. We did a winter inclusion school where we had a session called Let's Talk About Race. We had some summer masterclasses which focused on concepts such as unconscious bias, allyship, microaggressions, privilege, imposter syndrome. And we will be moving into an autumn inclusion school, which again is going to look at racism, etc., with a particular focus on disability and neurodiversity, as well as LGBT+. Now, in addition to our inclusion school, we also did an immersive drama-based development program with all of the ICS, as well as our organisational chair, CEO, and very, very senior managers, your executive level leaders, around a program called Comfortable Being Uncomfortable with Race. And this was around really ensuring that our very, very senior leaders, you know, were looking at this from a different lens and getting a more true immersive understanding of just how difficult these situations could be and how to really be engaged in those conversations to make the workplace a much better place for people to be able to speak up, etc. And we are also an organisation that prides itself on its inclusive leadership development programme. We have done a Stepping Up alumni in terms of growing our next generation of BAME leaders with a focus on compassionate, inclusive leadership styles. We're also a pioneering system that's leading on a programme called the High Potential Scheme, which is around identifying the future executive leaders within health and social care. And we also have a program called the Connects program, which is very inclusive module based in terms of having that as an integral part of the leadership style that we expect moving forwards in terms of setting our culture. Now, we do have other programs of inclusion work as well, and that's around coaching and mentoring. It's around reverse mentoring and, of course, talent management, which is absolutely key in terms of growing, developing, attracting, but very importantly, also retaining the workforce. And I'm going to stop there and pass over to my amazing team, who are going to take us through the rest of the presentation. So Lesley, if I can hand over to you, please.
Thanks, Shajida. Just trying to get the slide to move on. It doesn't want to. There we go. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about recruiting for inclusion. We recognised that in addition to educating, that if we were going to make a real significant impact on our workforce profile, we really need to focus on recruiting as well. We understood that for the majority of BAME job applicants who were facing what we call the white wall at job interviews, that was all too frequent, a microaggression that they were experiencing when applying for jobs. We set about changing that by appointing and developing a pool of BAME champions, who we've more recently relaunched as Inclusive Recruitment Guardians. This included providing training and support to those individuals to be equal and impactful members of the panel, and also encouraging to be part of the whole shortlisting processes as well, wherever possible. We initially made our diverse panels mandatory for posts at Band 8 and above, but we then moved to Band 7 roles, and we're shortly moving to encompass all roles at Band 5 and above within that essential requirement. We saw that this area around inclusive recruitment was so key that we made it a core project, which was overseen by our Trust Inclusion Council, a little bit similar to the task and finish groups that Hannah mentioned in the previous presentation. By having this approach, it's enabled us to push the boundaries on this project, to maintain the pace and to deliver sustainable change, as well as bringing a wider range of protected characteristics into consideration, such as we've been looking at how we can make our recruitment and subsequent employment more accessible and desirable to people who are neurodiverse and people living with disability. We've additionally recruited to a range of positive action roles to help embed change. These have included some BAME inclusion facilitator secondments. We've had 3 post holders through those roles, and also a BAME practice education facilitator role, which has recently been appointed to on a permanent basis. And those roles have really they've helped us to be able to embed change, and they've given practical development experience to some of our stepping up graduates as well, to help them in their ongoing careers. The Trust is also seeking to recruit to a community engagement coordinator role that will work with our clinical teams across North Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, working with our diverse communities within those localities and working to address health inequalities. So I'm going to now hand over to Amina.
Thanks, Lesley. So, communicating for inclusion. So, as a trust, we recognise that it's really important to weave inclusion into everything that we do. And one way we're doing that at Combine is by making a conscious effort to raise awareness by regularly and consistently via our trust communications. So this includes things like having, weekly newsletter features on inclusion-related work that's happening not just within our trust, but beyond. And we feel that that's really helping to gradually embed that understanding of inclusion across the whole of the organisation. And we've also ramped up the use of visible communications that depict our diverse workforce, and created posters and banners on stamping out racism, and deployed more inclusive and representative imagery on our campaigns and across our website as well. I'd say we work quite closely with our comms team. We've dedicated resources and time to supporting our inclusion agenda, and they're really key to the delivery of our annual calendar of events, which includes things like Black History Month, South Asian Heritage Month, Pride, and most of the religious festivals that we celebrate. And the communication isn't just one-sided at Combine. We have a number of channels and mechanisms that give voice to staff, and one of them being our BAME staff network that I have the honour of leading. So it was established in 2019, and I'd say it's quite a powerful channel for rooting out the issues that truly matter to our staff, and it helps us keep our focus on tackling the things that impact us specifically, as well as those broader trust and res related issues as well. And I'm pleased to share that our network has recently undergone a rebranding in recognition of the problematic term BAME, and our members voted in favour of the new name ENRICH, which stands for Equality Network of Race, Inclusion and Cultural Heritage. And I hope you like it just as much as we do. So this is our network is one of 3 other networks, the others being Mcann. The acronym stands for Combined Ability Network for Disability and Neurodiversity, for Combined Ability Network, and that's for disability and neurodiversity. And we've also got the LGBTQ+ network as well. And the 3 of those networks, they feed into our Inclusion Council, which takes place monthly and is led by our CEO. And as network leads, we have direct access to our exec board level sponsors who really listen to, support and champion the work that our networks do. So yeah, I'm really proud to be a part of the combined network and the movement that we've got towards inclusion. And finally, I'll just hand back over to Shajida to round up for us.
Thank you, Lesley, and thank you, Amina. So, you know, as the slide very clearly says, we're very, very proud in terms of how we've developed our culture of race inclusion within Combined. You know, our approach has been very much about making it personal, making it, you know, tangible, making it feel real, around making sure that, you know, people were fully apprised of the opportunities that were available, in terms of enhancing that understanding and continuing that journey of understanding. And very much our approach is around don't stop. We're not going to stop this. This will be a continuous for us. The final thing I'd like to say is that, you know, inclusion is something that we've amplified, in particular as the whole world went through the pandemic. We didn't pause, we didn't suspend, we didn't reflect. If anything, we forged ahead with more pace and with more energy, because for us, inclusion is fundamental when it comes to retaining the staff, when it comes to developing the staff, but very importantly in terms of the psychological safety of our staff. The final words I'm going to say is I'm really proud that Combined, we don't just talk change, we have actually made that change. So thank you everyone for listening to us. We do have some further information on our inclusion videos if anyone would like us to share that. And if anybody wants to reach out to us, I'm sure Lesley and colleagues can make our contact emails available as well. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us, and in particular our journey of race inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Combined team. So combined in name and combined in action. So thank you very much. As I'm keeping an eye on the clock, I'm going to turn now to our 3rd finalist. So sorry, no time for questions, but please do go back to Sajida and her team with your questions. And I see that some sharing is going on between Hannah and Lesley. So that's the whole point of this session, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. So moving on to our 3rd and final finalist, it's Hull University Teaching Hospitals with their entry entitled Base Camp towards becoming a fully inclusive hospital. So we have Elaine Hillaby here, who's the OD facilitator, and she's representing the trust. So we'll hear shortly with a pre-recorded 10-minute video. So the philosophy here is the focus on the trust HR and OD teams to create a base camp to explore what the trust could look like as a truly diverse and inclusive organisation. So if we look at utopia, what do we need? So you looked then to look at the support and the challenges that brings when you're creating the ideal environment. So we're going to hear about those practical routes that you've sort of decided to promote when looking at promoting EDI for all staff. So not just for leaders, not just for managers, but for everybody through your staff networks and the allyship programme. So Elaine and her colleagues have certainly worked passionately to build EDI into the DNA of the trust by reaching out in a very practical way. So again, if we've got time, Elaine will take questions, but over to the video presentation. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you, Jog.
So over to Lauren, video please. Oh, no
I think
video.
it's me. It's me.
Is it you? Oh, sorry. Over to Elaine. Back to Elaine.
Oops. Can everybody see the video?
We can, yes, Elaine. There's no voice though. Are you able to correct the voice, because we're watching it but we can't hear anything?
Oh, can you not hear anything?
No, not at all, I'm afraid.
All right, bear with me. Oh,
So we're 28 seconds in, you might need to take it to the beginning because we've not heard a thing.
Right, not a problem. I'll take it back. All right. Would help if I shared the sound. Apologies, everybody.
Hull University Teaching Hospitals.
9,000 strong workforce.
1,300 BAME colleagues.
80 nationalities.
A diverse and inclusive team.
Standing for equal opportunities.
Standing against discrimination.
Wherever it shows up.
We've come a long way.
Still far to go.
But if anyone can do this,
it's us.
I'm Helen Knowles, Head of HR Services at Hull University Teaching Hospitals, and I'm really privileged to be part of this journey where we work with managers and staff to consider equality, diversity and inclusion in their everyday conversations, both from a staff and patient perspective, recognising how diversity brings strength to us as individuals and also as an organisation.
Hi, I'm Lucy Vere. I'm Head of Learning and Organisational Development, and for us this project has been a true base camp, and it's really about us giving voices to the staff in a different way. So it's not just action plans that for the sake of action plans. This is one of the key pillars of our organisation, equality, diversity and inclusion, and this is just the start of our journey.
Hi, I'm Nami Sarja. I'm a senior practitioner within organisational development. To build on what Lucy shared, we have been focused on empowering our staff to find their voice and to use their voice, but most importantly, laying the groundwork so everyone truly listens to one another to see how our culture can be more inclusive. We've done this through events like a summit event, bringing our staff together to share their lived experience, and we've tailored our leadership development programs so that they really build the capability in all of our staff to be inclusive within the workplace.
My name's Elaine Hillaby and I'm a facilitator as part of the organisational development team. I've been one of the beneficiaries of the work that's been done within HUTH, and I'm proud to say that I am the chair of our newly created Enabled Staff Support Network, which focuses the voices and lived experience of our disabled staff members.
So Helen, if it's okay, I'm going to start with yourself. Because I know that we talked a lot about this project at the time and what we're going to do about it. Just kind of what were your thoughts as we were beginning and you know, at the beginning of this project?
I think one of the first things we recognised is we had a BME network for a period of time. However, it wasn't as well attended and as diverse as it could have been. So I was asked to take over leading the network, and I remember one of the first meetings we went to, it was most probably myself, clearly not from a BME perspective, and maybe one or two other colleagues. And I think a couple of meetings later, Nami joined us as she joined the organisation, and we had some real discussions about what is it that we need to do differently, because what we're doing at the moment isn't working. We had the conversation about an opportunity to celebrate our BME colleagues by putting together a summit, giving half a day for our BME colleagues to come together in one place. It was October 2019 at the time, so it was pre-pandemic. You might all remember that, or you might not. But so it was when we met at the University of Hull, and we had some guest speakers, and I was really pleased about the amount of people that came and the energy and the enthusiasm that they brought with them. So that was the beginning of our re-energisation of our network.
Thanks, Helen. So as you're hearing Helen speak, Nami, what are your reflections? Because you've kind of been on that journey as well in parallel. So tell me how you felt coming into the organisation and supporting with this piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the summit event quite soon in to joining was an excellent piece of work to get started on. And I felt really excited about meeting staff across the organisation who might be from a similar background to me, who are of other ethnic groups, and just to hear what their experience is within Hull, within our organisation, was a really, well, it was a privilege to listen into the stories of others. We also made sure that we invited a keynote speaker to this event who shared her journey and her lived experience. And I think what it meant was it validated a lot of the experiences of those within the group. And we really did explore the barriers that staff experience that prevent them from thriving in HUTH, but also what are the things that really are effective. We spoke to them about what do staff networks need to look like moving forward? How can they be effective? How do they need to run in a way that will support the staff that are part of it? I think also the presence and kind of active participation of our chief executive and our director of workforce at the summit event really did set the tone that this is something that HUTH is going to be absolutely committed to moving forward. Following the summit, I think the membership has significantly grown, and there is active participation and consistent participation as well from the exec team, from allies, but also the members who have the lived experience and structures and, you know, reporting procedures that mean that the staff, that the work is truly embedded in the action plans, and it's owned by everyone, not just one or two individuals. So I think that's a really key thing.
I'd agree with you. I mean, I think sort of watching that experience and what I would notice prior to that, Helen, you and I would be sat filling action plans out and trying to represent voices that weren't ours to represent sometimes. And while you're doing your best and you know sometimes intuitively what the right things to do, I think it did feel for a number of years that the right voices weren't in those action plans. And I think one of the things I think this kind of past 18 months to 2 years has done for us is for us to look at our RES action plans and our submissions and truly see the actions that are going to make a difference. And while we can't deliver them all in one go, we're clear on our priorities. And, you know, we know what staff voices want to do in terms of making that decision. At this point, I'm just going to come to you, Elaine, if that's all right, because one of the other pieces of work we've done is kind of the follow-on from working with, you know, looking at setting up our BAME Leadership Network, was we're refocusing on staff with a disability or a long-term condition. And we know that we haven't been delivering from them from a number of different sources for a while through staff surveys and that. And we were lucky enough to actually have some funding from the WDES Innovation Fund. And Elaine, you came to work in the OD team as a part of that. So listening to these reflections, how's it been from your perspective, looking at it from staff with a disability or long-term condition?
I mean, from my point of view, I identify as a disabled member of staff within HUTH, and when I came into the secondment to assist with the inclusion of disabled members of staff within the trust, I found a lot of people that felt that they weren't being listened to, that they weren't being heard, that they were being left behind and neglected. And we ran a questionnaire for these for the staff to complete. We also ran a project group so we could hear their responses and just feel what they were feeling and their lived experience of being a staff member in HUTH. From that, we've been able to create the Enabled Staff Support Network, and we're in its infancy. It's only had 2 meetings so far, but they are being well attended and people are starting to take notice, and we are starting to make a difference in encouraging disability confidence within the trust and getting disabled people to see that we're actually earnest and genuine in wanting to change their lives for the better and enable them to reach their full potential, and that it's not just a flash in the pan and a tick box exercise, that we actually intend to build on this start and just keep building and building and building until we have a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's so great. It's really nice to reflect on it. This is a nice experience, and I think we know that we're not there yet, you know, which is why we've called this base camp. But the commitment from the people on this call and outside of it has just been phenomenal, and I think that we're really happy to share this with you. We know some of you might be further on than we are, and we'd love to hear from you. Always happy to take help, but this is just a small reflection on the work that we've done, and we would encourage you, if you haven't started, to start it. You'll be able to make a difference. You'll hear voices that will make working at your trust brilliant, because actually diversity matters, inclusion matters, and we're very glad to have been able to share our thoughts with you today. Thank you very much. Thanks Elaine, thanks Nami, and thanks Helen.
Thank you, Elaine. That was great from you and your colleagues. Certainly your speech was very, very passionate about not being left behind, you know, the rest of your colleagues taking notice, a level playing field. And certainly my feeling is that adopting a truly inclusive workplace is becoming mainstream. Any good employer is going to be left behind if they decide not to make it mainstream and part of their day-to-day business. So we heard from Combined about education, learning, communication, reinforcement. Nobody's stopping still, and that's the universal message. You know, we don't put the notes away. We carry on reinventing ourselves, particularly as we're looking at multi-generational workforces. So we'll have to take different approaches to learning and education with different groups. So we take into account cultural differences, but there will be generational differences. So I'm really pleased that there's a lot of activity on the chat function and that you're swapping brilliant case studies with each other and sharing toolkits. So a big thank you from all of us to all our finalists for sharing their journeys. And yes, please carry on reaching out to them if you want to learn more, because they truly have worked very, very hard and imaginatively. They've captured our attentions today, but clearly the idea is to spread the success far and wide, so we're not reinventing the same tools again. That would be a waste of time. So and even more so, please do support these finalists at the award ceremony. They'd love to see you there, and thank you all for listening.